So when we were looking at the link budget, we realized that when we even after dispersion compensation, the length of the fiber finally gets limited because of the loss budget, and we cannot arbitrarily increase the transmit power, thereby improve the loss budget, because the fiber is a nonlinear medium, and we said that there is a limit to the power that can be launched in the fiber. So in couple of modules from now, we will see what are the specific issues or what would be the impairment cost when we increase the power into the fiber, and these are primarily the nonlinear effects in the fiber, and there are 5 more prominent nonlinear effects in the fiber. The first 3 are caused because of the fact that the susceptibility is nonlinear. The susceptibility of the fiber is nonlinear, so we call it is because of the third order susceptibility of the fiber, and the last 2 are because of nonlinear scattering mechanisms. So these are nonlinear scattering mechanisms, the Raman and the Brillouin scattering processes. So these are the nonlinearities that influence the propagation of signal through an optical fiber. Let's start with cell phase, cross phase modulation and Fourier mixing. So why does the fiber become nonlinear? So in general, all media, any material media, a dielectric media in general is nonlinear. It's just that in their regular mode of operation, we do not see the nonlinear effects. We start seeing the nonlinear effects when the intensity becomes larger, and I'll tell you why. So let's take the propagation of an electric field E through a dielectric medium. We know that the electric field oscillates with a frequency omega, e power j, e naught e power j omega t, and the propagation is explained by this beta z term. So we are trying to see how an electric field which is oscillating at a frequency omega propagates through a specific dielectric medium, and when you apply an electric field, let's say at any given instant of time, the electric field is pointing upward. This would mean that this can induce a dipole in the dielectric, such that the negative charge in the dipole and the positive charge in the dipole get pointed this way. Now when the electric field changes its direction, the dipole basically reverses its direction. So we can say that there is a polarization P. This is not the polarization, which means the direction of electric field. What we are talking about is the induced polarization, which is quantifying the dipole moment that is created inside the medium, right, inside the silica medium in this case. So the electric field induces a certain dielectric polarization, and this polarization can be written as proportional to electric field. It is not just linearly proportional to the electric field, it has a second order dependence and a third order dependence to the electric field, and so on. Essentially meaning that this P versus E relation is not linear, and the linear part of that relation can get quantified through the electric susceptibility, which is your chi 1. The second order coefficient is your second order susceptibility, and the coefficient of the third degree term is your this is your third order susceptibility. Okay. So this linear susceptibility actually leads to the dielectric response, the simple linear response, which is essentially the refractive index. This contributes to the refractive index of the medium. Larger is the refractive index, more sluggish is the response of the medium. So similarly, the chi is actually a complex number. The imaginary part of chi contributes to the attenuation or the loss in the system, And of course, this whole phenomena can be expressed in a figure like this, where induced polarization is a nonlinear function of the electric field. The x-axis is the stimulus and y-axis is the response. So if your input electric field is really small, the response is linear, so you need to worry about only the first term here. You can calculate the response of the medium just by using the linear susceptibility. But when your applied field becomes larger, that's when the second order and the third order term starts becoming important. So the second order term actually is not significant in optical fibers because of the nature of the arrangement of silica molecules. It's a centrosymmetric crystal. So in such cases, if there is a symmetry in the system, the second order effect actually cancels out. So the lowest order nonlinearity in silica, is caused by the third order susceptibility. Okay, so all the nonlinear effects in silica optical fibers is caused because of chi3. Now let's see how. So let's go into a little bit more details of the math. So let's say the applied electric field into the fiber is given by this. There is a certain spatial dependence and there is e power j omega t. The transverse profile we are ignoring for now. It can also have a specific transverse profile, and the electric field can be represented as e power j omega t plus complex conjugate, just to make sure that the field is real. The nonlinear polarization. So you see here, this contributes to what is called as a linear polarization. We don't have chi2 for a fiber. So this part is what we call as the nonlinear polarization, and this nonlinear polarization is epsilon naught chi3 E. Now remember, even though we wrote this equation this way, each of these electric field is a vector quantity. So in these products, chi2 E is actually a tensor product, and chi2 is actually a second order tensor. Chi3 is a tensor with rank 3. It has 81 elements, but we will not get into such details because we will assume that the electric field is polarized only in one specific direction, and we will take the most contributing nonlinear polarization. So our nonlinear polarization is chi3 in times epsilon naught times E cube. So that is nothing but because you are taking half cube, you have 1 by 8 epsilon naught chi3, and you have E plus E conjugate raised to the power 3. So you have this of the form a plus b the whole cube. So you can go on expanding this. So you have E cube, E conjugate cube, and there is a term corresponding to 3 times E square j 2 omega t and E conjugate e power minus j omega t. So that gives you this term, and you have the fourth term corresponding to 3ab square. Now if you realize, these two are complex conjugates of each other. So you have E cube with a frequency e power 3 omega t, j3 omega t, and its complex conjugate. And out of this next two terms, you have E and E conjugate coming up as mod E square, and you have e power j omega t plus complex conjugate. So it means that when your electric field is incident on this fiber, there is a response induced polarization which will have a linear response corresponding to epsilon naught chi e, plus there is a nonlinear response which corresponds to epsilon naught chi 3, and there was an E cube, and those contributions are what we have written here. It means the system responses not just in the same frequency as that of the input. There is a response corresponding to there's a linear response where the induced polarization is oscillating at the same frequency as that of the input, but there is also a nonlinear response where there is a oscillation at 3 omega frequency, and also an oscillation at omega frequency, and that coefficient is chi3 in addition to the coefficient chi. So it means that there are as the electric field is incident in silica, the induced polarization oscillates at omega because of the linear response, at frequency 3 omega because of the nonlinear response, and also at frequency omega because of the nonlinear response. Okay. So it will turn out that we call this generation of 3 omega frequency as the third harmonic generation. We will realize later that this is a process that requires phase matching. We will talk more about phase matching later. For now, let us assume that the phase matching is a very difficult proposition in especially for third harmonic generation. But what is interesting is that there is an additional contribution at frequency omega with a coefficient 1/8 epsilon naught chi3. Okay. So the total induced polarization is epsilon naught chi1 E plus epsilon naught chi3 E cube. So epsilon naught chi1 plus there is an epsilon naught so this is the nonlinear contribution, out of which we took out this so out of this 3 mod E square E, half of e power j omega t plus complex conjugate can be represented as vector E itself. So what is left for you is 3/4 chi3 mod E square. Now this was the case. This first term is contributed because of the linear response, and the second term, again with oscillating at omega frequency, is contributed by the nonlinear response. Now the question is how what's the magnitude of the second term with respect to the first term. So it turns out that chi3 is actually 10 power minus 15 or minus 16 times chi1, which means it is way orders of magnitude smaller than chi1, and which is why we do not consider this contribution at all when we talk about propagation in when we talk about linear propagation. But when your E becomes very large, when you have large electric field, which means large intensity, when you have large intensity, you have large electric field, then even though your chi3 is orders of magnitude smaller than chi1, the product chi3 times mod E square will start contributing to the total induced the induced polarization, and hence at large intensity you will start seeing some nonlinear effects. Now note that this particular nonlinear effect that we are talking about is not about generating additional frequency. It's about generating an additional contribution to chi1, which we will see that it is an additional contribution to refractive index, and that additional contribution is dependent on your input intensity. So let's see how. So we see now here that the susceptibility of the medium is modified. So if it is a linear system, the induced polarization is epsilon naught chi E. The electric displacement, which tells you the response of the system to an applied electric field, it is epsilon naught E plus induced polarization. By the way, this induced polarization is dipole moment per unit volume, that's all. So this P is epsilon naught chi E, and so this is epsilon naught times 1 plus chi times E, and this 1 plus chi is what we call as the relative permittivity epsilon R, and the refractive index is related to the relative permittivity, as refractive index is nothing but the square root of relative permittivity, which is root of 1 plus chi. This is what for a what happens in a linear system. Now what happens in a nonlinear system? Now in a nonlinear system, the refractive index gets modified because we modified, we saw in the previous slide that the susceptibility got modified. So how exactly does it get modified? So you say the refractive index is actually 1 plus chi, but this 1 plus chi, in the previous picture we saw that the chi is actually modified as chi1 plus 3/4 chi3 mod E square. So instead of chi1 we have chi1 plus 3/4 chi3 mod E square. So how does that come into play here? So, it is 3/4 chi3 mod e square. So, this is how the refractive index gets modified. So, I am just writing this as raised to the power half, and I am taking out 1 plus chi from this whole term. So, this is 1 plus chi outside the bracket. So, this is 1 plus 3/4 n square, n naught square, where n naught now represents the refractive index in the linear system, the regular linear refractive index. So, n naught is nothing but, so this is n naught, 1 plus chi, 1 plus just chi 1, okay. And so, because you took a 1 plus chi out, so you will have a 1 plus chi in the denominator, which you are representing as n naught square here, and then you have chi 3 and mod e square raised to the power half. So, 1 plus chi raised to the power half is n naught anyway. So, you have this whole thing raised to the power half. Now, I told you that this magnitude of chi 3 is 10 power minus 16 or 10 power minus 21. So, it ranges between that values. So, 3/4 n naught square. So, this term is actually very small when compared to 1. And unless your electric field is really high. So, what we can do is we can do a Taylor expansion for this 1 plus x raised to the power half and retain up to just one term. So, that is 1 plus 3/4 1 plus half x. So, truncating up to 2 terms. So, this is 1 plus half of this term. So, that is 8 n naught square chi 3 mod e square. And you can now multiply n naught here. So, this is n naught plus 3/8 n naught chi 3 mod e square. This is n naught plus, you can write instead of electric field, you can write it in terms of a measurable quantity, what is given here. Intensity is half epsilon naught C n naught mod e square. So, you can substitute this mod e square here in terms of intensity. So, ultimately you end up with the fact that the refractive index is the linear refractive index. The linear refractive index is nothing but square root of 1 plus chi 1 plus a contribution n2 times I, and that n2 is this number which is dependent on the third order susceptibility among all the other coefficients. So, it means that there is a contribution to the refractive index, and that contribution, the refractive index of the system actually gets modified. And the beauty is that the refractive index gets modified and the change is dependent on the intensity of the incident light. So, larger is your intensity, the larger is your modification of refractive index. And this n2, by the way, is also called as nonlinear index coefficient. Nonlinear index coefficient. It will have units of per intensity. Intensity will have a unit of watt per meter square. So, N2 will have a unit of inverse of watt per meter square.